Game ain't over. The sun is shining. And it ain't over.
You wanted the best, you got the best from my home studio on Long Island, New York. Welcome to Ian Scotto Rocks. I am your host, Ian Scotto. I've been going to concerts since 1996, and I feel like I was just born to do what I'm doing now on this channel, talking about all this stuff. I was only 9 years old at the time, seeing the Red Hot Chili Peppers with Silverchair at Nassau Coliseum, which I begged my mom to go to in the middle of a snowstorm. And I actually got to meet Dave Navarro about 16 years later while working at SiriusXM at the time, and I told him all about it. My first concert of the hair metal genre, however, made a definitive impression on me, and I honestly feel like it changed the trajectory of my life in some ways. And that concert would be Vince Neil of Motley Crue at the Downtown in Farmingdale, Long Island, a venue that no longer exists, just like so many others, sadly. I was into Motley Crue, but not even remotely to the level which I was in the years to come. I mean, my first tattoo was of the Dr. Feelgood album cover. When I went to that show, though, I just got it. Something clicked. There's really no other way to put it. Vince Neil has never been a vocal virtuoso, and it wasn't a particularly amazing performance or any of that. In fact, Vince Neil seemed kind of buzzed, and I even remember him dropping the mic stand on some girl in the crowd by accident at one point. Yeah, kind of typical Vince Neil stuff. What it was for me, though, was that it was just a party. That's how I would describe it. I was into the nu metal stuff that was so prevalent at the time, had seen a bunch of those bands, and I still like many of those bands. But the attitude at a certain point became such a drag. I can appreciate good songs about battling your demons and inner rage, but I feel like the genre many of us lovingly still do call hair metal embodies that spirit of separating yourself from the outside world, just letting go, and living it up in the moment. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. So I've been chasing that dragon, so to speak, ever since that night back in 2003, and it hasn't stopped. I still go to concerts of all different genres, but club-level 80s rock acts will forever hold a very special place in my heart. Those are the shows that I attend the most. I traveled all the way to South Dakota back in 2016 to see Dokken's final ever US show with the classic lineup. And hey, I just so happen to be wearing a Dokken hoodie right now. Love Dokken. I recently came back from my second trip to LA that I made to attend a bunch of hair metal shows at the legendary Whiskey A Go-Go. And one thing that bothers me is that people often speak like that time is just come and gone, and the only way we can ever experience it again is when we put on the music and just reminisce. But so many of these bands are still touring, and so many of them still bring it. Not all of them, but many of them. So with that, as someone who's seen countless bands from the 80s era, the good, the bad, and the ugly, here's my definitive list of the top 5 bands of hair metal that still bring it live. Let's start off at number 5 with one of those bands I just saw in LA, and that I did a deep dive on for the channel that many of you loved, LA Guns. If you watched that video, you know that LA Guns has gone through a clusterfuck of lineup changes. But the two most important components of that band, Tracy Guns and Phil Lewis, have been back in action together ever since 2017 when they released The Missing Piece. First off, that album is one of the best albums of the past decade, period. I think a lot of it had to do with their second guitarist at the time, Michael Grant, because he had songwriting credits, and nothing since has been quite as good, but I've still really liked it all a lot. Getting into the live performance aspect, Tracy is one of the most underrated guitarists of all time. When you watch him shred live, you truly feel like you're in the presence of greatness. Phil Lewis still sounds like he did in his heyday, and the man has just turned 68 years old. They switch it up in the set list quite a bit, and it's a good mix of the new stuff and the classic songs from the first 3 albums. You won't hear much from their discography from 1994 to 2012, except for maybe a song here or there. The rest of the band is great, and I'll add this. I wasn't sure how I felt about Ace Von Johnson on second guitar, since, as I mentioned, how I really liked what Michael Grant brought to the band. I thought that maybe he just had the right look with the tattoos and being a couple of decades younger than those guys, bringing some youth to the outfit. But in more recent shows that I've seen him play, they let him shred some more up there to spotlight his skills, and I can say that he's definitely a solid guitar player. They tour constantly, and they have a new album coming out this year called Leopard Skin that I expect will be great, so go see them. Next at number 4, we've got Def Leppard. I'll already be a spoiler and say that Def Leppard will be the only stadium-level band on this list because, quite frankly, they're the best of them still doing it on that level. I saw them over the summer, and I remember when they hit the stage with Rock, Rock Till You Drop, and me just having a huge smile while watching them. They put on a great show. They also have had the same lineup since 1992 when Vivian Campbell replaced the late Steve Clark. How many touring bands can say that? Joe Elliott may not sound exactly like he did during the days of Pyromania, but he still absolutely has it. And unlike a lot of the stadium-level 80s acts, these guys refuse to play to any backing tracks to hide any flaws. That's what it's all about. If you go see them, they'll mix in a few of the new songs, but you're still going to see most of the hits, along with a few deeper cuts from the older days. At number 3, we've got a band that I just love, and that I feel doesn't get enough respect. Faster Pussycat. One thing that may be a deal breaker for some of you, though, is that it's just one original member still in the band, Tammy Down. That being said, this current lineup does a fantastic job replicating what you hear on the albums. Their lead guitarist Sam Bam has been doing an amazing job. Kudos to him. The thing that really stands out is this, though. If you've seen Faster Pussycat from the time they started touring again in 2001 up until 2018, you'll remember Tammy looking kind of bloated and having this aura of just being sort of uninterested up there. He'd chain smoke cigarettes on stage and not really move around much. It's not a diss because I saw them during this time and still always had a blast and kept coming back because the songs were always killer and it was just that kind of rock show. Something changed though in 2019 because I remember seeing them at the Chance in Poughkeepsie then, yet another venue that has been torn down, and he was like a new person. Well, I later learned that Tammy suffered a major health scare and was warned by doctors that if he didn't cut down on the drinking and drugging along with the cigarettes, that he might be knocking on heaven's door, so to speak. It scared him straight because he turned his life around, got off everything, and he now sounds better and brings more energy than ever before. Their set lists change quite a bit, so they're not a band you'll ever get bored of seeing live. I've even noticed that they've seemed to attract a new fan base just from the fact that I'm far from the youngest person you'll see at their shows, which isn't usually the case with these 80s acts for me. Not bad for a band that's only released a few sporadic songs here and there in recent years, including NOLA and Like a Ghost. Those songs are fucking killer though. As for fans of the classic lineup, especially if you go to see them in LA, you may get an unexpected surprise. At their last show I went to in LA for just prior to New Year's Eve, they brought up original guitarist Greg Steele for a bunch of songs. And back in 2015, also in LA, they had Brent Muscat and Eric Stacey come up on stage along with Greg for a one-off Cat House reunion. So if you're in LA seeing Faster Pussycat and you love the original players, you never know. Coming in at number 2, we've got Winger. I've seen both Kip Winger solo and Winger the full band live a few times in recent years, and they definitely always bring it. Speaking the full band lineup, every single one of those guys is a master musician. Additionally, it's the original lineup of the band plus John Roth, who joined them back in 1993 during the album Pull. They're still putting out amazing music. I love their last album, appropriately titled 7, which even featured a single written with the amazing Desmond Child titled Proud Desperado. If you go to see them live, you're going to hear some soloing, and you'll also hear their wide array of hits, from the beautiful Miles Away to some of the surprisingly more gritty stuff. One thing to note, however, is that Kip Winger has hinted in recent interviews that they're expecting to ramp things down after many years of touring. I personally can't imagine the physical strain of these performances on a guy like Rod Morgenstein, because the guy drums like he's Dave Lombardo at times, and he's now 71 years old. So make sure you go see them. You may not have many more chances to do so. Guys, if you're liking this content, I can't stress it enough. Hit the subscribe button. I don't just say that. I say it because we're going to be really bringing it with content this year and doing all types of videos like this. And also, check out the merch store where you can get great stuff like this mug right here at ianscottorocks.etsy.com. With that, at number 1, can you play a drum solo here, Basilius? Sebastian Bach. I'm not talking about Skid Row, who I've also seen live, who is currently absent a singer, but the solo band of Sebastian Bach. And he actually makes it hard to praise him sometimes, but I'm still going to. The guy has gone on tweeting rampages recently, including writing, "Fuck America," after Kamala Harris lost the presidential election. So it's been hard to still support him for many of us. I'm putting that aside, though, and just going to talk about the music, and the fact remains that this guy still puts on the best performance in the biz. He prides himself on not singing to any backing tracks, and yet he's still hitting a lot of those high notes from the classic years of Skid Row. And what you're going to see when you catch him live pretty much consists of classic Skid Row, if you don't already know that. Despite releasing 5 solo releases, he keeps his set mainly centered around the classics. But since we're talking Bach's solo releases, his latest album, Child Within the Man, has to be the best release of 2024. And the song Hold On to the Dream is genuinely one of the best songs I've ever heard in my life. Not joking. He brought on master guitar players like John Five, Steve Stevens, and Orianti for this one. And it shows that despite some of the ridiculousness in his personal life, the guy still puts a hell of a lot into when he writes, records, and performs music. I just wish he'd put the bottle down before tweeting. For fans of classic Skid Row, he's also been known to bring out original drummer Rob Affuso for some shows here and there, which I've had the pleasure of seeing. However, that's mainly for shows in the area of where Rob resides in Newburgh, New York. So if you're in Topeka, Kansas or something and are hoping to see an appearance from Rob Affuso, it's probably not going to happen. Much like how an OG Skid Row reunion probably isn't going to happen. But don't let that detract you from seeing Bach live. So that's my list, guys. LA Guns, Def Leppard, Faster Pussycat, Winger, and Sebastian Bach. Let me know if you agree. Let me know if you disagree. If you're someone who goes to shows regularly, I'm sure you have a valid opinion on this one, and I'd love to hear it. So type it right here in the comments. And while you're here, check out this video because I spoke about LA Guns and their dysfunction a little bit. I did a whole video on it if you haven't seen it already, and you're going to dig it.